Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It is the 14th of July, Bastille Day. If you're looking for a holiday to associate with the 14th of July, and I am very pleased to have with me tonight Alex Scarlato, state representative from District 4, Canyonville and thereabouts, and also ran for Congress a couple of times in a district I'm actually pretty familiar with at this point after 2024. And hats off to that effort, too, because to be honest, Alec is fighting on all battlefronts to advance the cause of conservative principles. Welcome to the show, Representative Scarlatos.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to say Representative Scarlatos. If it's all right, I'll call you Alec the rest of the way, just because it's a little bit easier. But tell us where your state representative district, what it covers, the general area.
So my district is, I don't like to use this phrasing, but it's basically the dead space in between Roseburg, Grants Pass, and Medford. It's all of the towns in like that triangle of an area in between those cities. So tons of small towns, very rural, like you mentioned, Canyonville, Glendale, Azalea, Rogue River, and all the way down to Central Point on the freeway.
And they just kind of drew it around Grants Pass and around Medford to kind of, as their usual gerrymandering tendencies, right? So,
yeah, pretty much. And I mean, plus, to be fair, there's only about 70,000 people in each district. And, Grants Pass and Cave Junction is Dwayne Yunker. The Roseburg area is Virgil Osborne. So they needed another representative for all the area in between, I suppose. And so that's me. I live just south of Winston, so I'm barely in the district, but it is a wonderful district, very rural, like I said, and that's the kind of people that I like to represent.
Well, and it is also a lot of folks that don't necessarily feel terribly well represented in Salem in terms of the people that run our state. And small towns and rural areas have kind of gotten, elbow in the face a bit over the years. So having someone like yourself there to fight for them is super important. And I think about this last legislative session. It's the long session. So when you go for almost 6 months and there's 4,000 bills that fly through there, but it all comes down to usually a handful of high stakes pieces of legislation at the end. I think the transportation bill, the biggest issue that happened as the session drew to a close, didn't even come out till June 9th, I think. And they tried to ramrod it through, and it didn't work. It was a weird session to many of us that observed this. What is your take on how that went down, and your thoughts about where we're at now?
Well, I think part of what they were doing was saving some of the worst stuff for the end, just because they wanted to almost hold it hostage, so that they could try to get Republican votes in exchange for money for their district, or other bills that we wanted that they were also holding to the end, just to try to prevent us from walking, things of that nature. But luckily, at the end of the day, they didn't even have the Democrat votes to pass the bill. So they were even more desperate for a Republican, and luckily we all kind of held our ground there and stayed together. But it's a bad bill when even Democrats, who can have their committees threatened, they can get threatened with a primary, they can get threatened by the unions not supporting them anymore. I mean, as a Democrat in the supermajority, there's very real, tangible consequences for you in your political career if you don't go along with something like that. And even then, it was too big of a bill for some of them. And so what happened was, at the very end, they tried like a compromise package, which on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of Democrats didn't think went far enough. And of course, the unions were upset about it because it wasn't bringing enough money into government, and therefore government unions. And so it didn't get support from kind of the other end of the spectrum of the Democratic Party. And so as a result, it failed at the very end. They basically just ran out of time, because they tried to negotiate it to death, and people weren't budging, and Republicans luckily weren't going to give them any added time to do anything with it. And so we just let the clock run out and they didn't get it passed. So it was a huge win for us, huge win for the state of Oregon. And, there's some Democrat senators like Mark Meek who, frankly, did a lot for us.
Yeah. Yeah. When it's too ugly, and it got uglier and uglier, eventually it was like the redheaded stepchild. Nobody wanted this bill at the end, it seemed, except Tina Kotek and Speaker Fahey were still sort of fighting down to the last second. But
Well, at the end of the day, too, you got to remember that this this bill is throwing more money at ODOT, and ODOT is a failing agency. I mean, they had that huge $1 billion budget shortfall.
yeah, oops.
Yeah, exactly. They've been mismanaged for a long, long time. This isn't just a big spending bill. It's a big spending bill that's going towards one of the worst managed agencies in the state with one of the largest budgets. And so people were just seeing this and saying, oh, so there's going to be no accountability, and we're going to solve the problem by just giving that agency more money and more responsibility when they can't handle what they already have on their plate. I mean,
Yeah.
they wasted $70 million studying tolling for the I-5 bridge. That's enough money to keep a huge chunk of the jobs that they're now cutting in our districts. It could have kept those people around if they just didn't waste money on tolling, if they cut their DEI employees before they cut their actual road service employees. But they're doing this as, frankly, political repercussions for people not voting for the bill.
Yeah. I mean, I think last week, uh, Representative Reschke told me it's $28 million is how much they spend on DEI and ODOT. And on top of that, they were already threatening, weren't they, in the past, before this whole budget cycle came along, that they couldn't plow the snow because they didn't have $19 million. I loved what you and the caucus came out with early in the session, which is the video of these two floors of the ODOT building that were almost empty, that they're really not using. And you said, let's
Yeah.
save $57 million by leasing that out. No dice.
Well, and on top of that, too, I mean, you got to think from the political strategy here. Leader Drazen was really bright when it came to messaging on the ODOT budget early, because when all of this fell apart, we could just point to and say, hey, we gave you guys a revised budget that cut from departments, that didn't add any new taxes, that would have kept all these people on the roads, maintaining the roads without increasing taxes. And we could point to that the entire process and say, you threw out our entire package, all of the Republican input that, people like Shelley Bosshart Davis spent a lot of time on, Leader Drazen spent a lot of time on. Democrats just threw it out the window, out of hand, didn't even give it the time of day. And then they expect Republicans to play ball with them when it comes to just taxing Oregonians more. No, that's not how it works. If you want our support, you have to take our input. And they did not want that. They did not want accountability for ODOT. They didn't want any cuts in any department. So as a result, we have this failed package now.
Yeah. And the unions, as you said, the public employee unions are angry because that final compromise wasn't even going to expand and flood ODOT with more cash. The other thing I think ODOT has had a big problem with is that they've received significant revenues. I believe it was 2017. There was an expansion of the fees and the gas tax.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to fund all kinds of changes and improvements. And as I understand it, I think I heard Leader Drazen the other day say they didn't do the Abernathy Bridge. The Rose Quarter, nothing's happened. That was like the big promise, right? That they were going to fix that I-5 Rose Quarter thing, which is a disaster. And they've done absolutely zero there, why would we give them more money and to do things like spend $70 million studying tolling? No one wants the tolling. They know that if it went to the ballot box,
Yeah.
people would vote it down overwhelmingly.
it's a great example of how all these government departments work for the most part. I mean, ODOT's just kind of the largest, most obvious example, only because, it's being talked about so much. It's so much money. The deal was so complicated and divisive. But almost every department run by the state of Oregon operates this exact same way. They grow every year, regardless of performance. And they do things like, uh, I almost say, intentionally don't finish projects so that they can go back and ask for more money down the road, or they delay projects, whether intentionally or by incompetence, so that then the project costs more money due to inflation and mismanagement, and then they come back asking the legislator for more money. It's terrible. I mean, we really do need a lot more accountability in the state of Oregon. I mean, there's of all the government agencies, probably half of them need their department heads replaced with someone new. I mean, anyway, I could go on, but we should probably move on from the ODOT budget. But it's
Well,
a disaster.
there is one last thing I did want to mention about ODOT. So there's a headline today and it's the Willamette Week, so not exactly a right wing publication. It says, as CoTech scrambles to save ODOT union jobs, here are positions being cut and vacated. So they're starting to list these out, and it's like it really says something else too, I think, about the governor's priorities with regard to the rest of the state and all of the economy, because there's some stuff happening with Oregon's economy right now, which is pretty significant. And she's only concerned about ODOT union jobs. Literally, the next two headlines I saw were Oregon is one of the worst states for business, according to a CNBC ranking. And then the other thing is Intel expands layoffs, cutting more than 10% of Oregon workforce, which is 2,400 workers. And those are, $150,000 to $200,000 a person jobs that are going to disappear from Oregon. And we know some of them are going to show up in Ohio, where actually Intel is expanding. There's a whole story to that. But the government is not scrambling to save high-tech chip production jobs. She's certainly not trying to save timber jobs. And so there's all these things that just aren't happening to make our economy strong and healthy, even if what you wanted to do was have enough taxes to pay for all this stuff.
Well, I mean, not to mention what happened with Dutch Brothers like 2 months ago when they decided to move their headquarters out of Grants Pass and down to Arizona. I mean, it's just so incredibly frustrating because, again, I'm down in Southern Oregon, timber country. They took away timber in, the early 90s, late 80s. And then seeing these economies and, frankly, county tax rolls just go down and down and down ever since then. And then you see every once in a while you get a bright spot like a Dutch Brothers that comes up from Southern Oregon.
Yeah.
And does very well for themselves. And then the second they get any kind of size, they have to make, a reasonable decision of, do we continue to do business in Oregon or do we move to a more business friendly state? And Oregon just fails on every metric of business friendliness. And so they decide to leave. And then, we jump through all these hoops and, work on tourism and all these other kinds of economies when we don't have timber, which is what all these small towns were created for. And then again, something like Dutch Brothers happens and then they end up leaving the state because it's not been business friendly enough. I mean, it blows my mind how Democrats think that we can survive in the rural parts of this state. I understand Portland's always probably going to have a decent sized economy, even with Intel leaving. They're slowly killing off the downtown, it seems like, but they're always going to have a stronger economy compared to the rest of the state. But other parts of the state do not have that luxury.
Yeah.
When we have a thriving timber economy or a farming economy or a tourism economy, we need to keep those going. And when you do have businesses that come up, we just tend to kill them off or run them out of the state. I mean, it's incredibly depressing to watch. And I'm in the legislature. I'm one of the few people that can do something about this, but yet we're in the super minority. The Democrats get to draw the maps, so they get to draw as many Democrats as they want in any number of districts. So it just seems, unless we have a broad wave of support coming in for the Republicans the next election cycle or two before the next redistricting, we're really going to be screwed for the next decade. So we need a Republican Secretary of State or a Republican majority in the House or the Senate before 2030, or else we're going to be in trouble for the next decade.
Yeah, and there's these structural long-term issues, like you mentioned about redistricting. There does seem to be a problem too that I'm not sure the media really holds the people running the state of Oregon accountable. The first thing they tried to do was blame the price of eggs in Oregon on President Trump as soon as he comes into office, but they've made eggs pretty darn expensive in the state of Oregon all on their own. and
Well,
I think about that, like that is a basic need that people have, basic food supply.
no, absolutely. I mean, the cost of living has gone up in Oregon disproportionately to the rest of the country. I mean, obviously there's inflation across the country, but we also have incredibly high, housing costs, our food costs, our gas costs, which increase the cost of everything due to, the taxes that we have on our gasoline and all fuel for that matter. But, it's just, you see, even with the transportation package, you see Tina Kotek try to blame Republicans who are in the super minority in both houses for the reason the transportation package failed. I mean, it's comical. We can't stop anything that she wants unless we walk, and we did not walk for the transportation package, and it died anyway. So she has no one to blame but her own party. And, like you said, the Oregon media will hold Democrats accountable for stuff like that from time to time, unless you're within 6 months of an election, in which case they'll start towing the party line and make sure that all of the Democrat candidates get favorable coverage. And then, the next long session will come around, and then they'll start talking badly about Democrats again for, a couple months.
Yeah, they'll hem and they'll haw and they'll whine a little bit, and then they go back, as you said, to well, we've got to protect them, and they're not protecting the people of Oregon. And I would actually say that if you look at Portland, they're not only killing the downtown, but the vacancy rate in office buildings is one of the highest in the country. That big pink building, they literally, yeah, I mean, that is like at a 10% sale price of what it was just 10 years ago. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the country unless the thing actually like caught on fire. And then the Black Box is another one that they apparently has just gone into bankruptcy. I don't know what, there's messages coming from the place they say is important. And I know it's difficult, even more so for the places that they don't care about at all, like rural Oregon. But there is an opportunity, right? There is a turnaround strategy. You guys have been talking about it. Part of it definitely is not only reviving our timber industry, but we could actually pay for, couldn't we, the ability to manage our forests and prevent wildfires and fund public services without turning our pockets inside out and say, gee, state of Oregon, please give us a bunch of money because we're helpless.
Well, that's the best part. I mean, we wouldn't be paying to manage our forests. We would be harvesting the forests and they would manage themselves. I mean, private timber companies, they only are responsible for like 20% or less of large forest fires. And on federal forests, it's like 70% of all major fires start on federal land. That's because they're mismanaged. I mean, this isn't like rocket surgery. You know what I mean? It's very simple stuff. If we just allow our timber companies to manage the forests, it'll create jobs, it'll reduce forest fires, it'll bring in tax dollars into the county government through the ONC lands. I mean, if you just look at what was going on in Southern Oregon in the 70s and 80s, the richest school district in the country for a minute was in Glide, Oregon, which is just east of Roseburg. I mean, I think there's a reason that if you look at who the most conservative representatives in the state of Oregon are, they're from this part of Oregon, because I feel like it's because we're the most jaded. we've been screwed the most by these terrible Democrat policies over the last 30, 35 years. It's just really sad to see. And again, it's not about bringing tax dollars in. It's just we could be so much better off. Every timber industry job creates tertiary jobs in the economy, from guys that sell chainsaws to diesel trucks to trucking companies to the guys that work on those trucks for the trucking companies. I mean, this entire economy was all but killed off 30 years ago. And, I get that there's automation and there's a lot of other things, but even if it doesn't bring back the same amount of jobs that it once did, it'll still bring in the same amount, if not more, tax dollars into county government, which have had a very rough go in the last 20 years, especially.
Yeah, and it's been an issue as we've seen problems like addiction and the related homelessness problem uh, grow, and law enforcement faces all these challenges. And the challenges, they grow as we see the ability to like deal with it shrink. This seems like an answer to more than just one thing that's happening, because I know people are done with the smoke. They're done with the annual wildfires, and if you wind the clock back several decades, it just wasn't that common because they were able to manage it.
Well, I mean, it's such a huge problem. I was in Indianapolis like 3 or 4 years ago, and there was all this smoke in the air, and I was curious. I was like, where's all this smoke from? They're like, oh, it's out from Oregon and Washington, all the forest fires. I didn't even realize that it made it all the way across the country.
Yeah,
I mean, it's insane. The environmental impact, the amount of carbon we're dumping into the atmosphere, if you care about that kind of stuff.
yeah,
I mean, not to mention, on federal land, these trees that burn up are oftentimes trees that are like so large and so old, we're never going to grow trees like that again. And not to
yeah,
mention, the federal government doesn't replant after a forest fire, they just let it grow up naturally again. And again, you're talking about land that's not even able to be managed in the future. It doesn't have any actual use for the economy because you're not replanting Douglas firs and the kind of trees you actually want to harvest. I mean, it's such a catastrophic failure on every level. It's disgusting. I mean, that's the issue that got me into politics. Kind of that's why I'm so animated about it. Trees and guns, obviously, but it's it just makes me so mad because we could be doing so much better in the state of Oregon, and I think people deep down know that, but for whatever reason, they don't want to vote Republican because of Trump or abortion or you name whatever pet issue. But man, at the end of the day, you got to look around at your state and your economy and think, we got to try something else. We can't continue down this road. I don't think anyone believes that we're better off than we were 20, 30 years ago. And on top of that, if you just go, the amount of federal money that comes into the state of Oregon, the amount of tax dollars that we spend in the state of Oregon, if we just went back to our 2001 level of government, the money that we bring in federally, federal money coming into the state, would be enough to cover every expense on the state of Oregon if we went back to 2001 levels of government.
yeah.
And we would have zero taxes in the state of Oregon, period, on anything, if we would just shrink our government back to 2001 levels. That'll never happen. And again, that analogy isn't perfect, but it's just when I saw that chart of basically us tripling the size of government in 20 years, I mean, it's shocking stuff. The more you learn, the more disgusted you get. Honestly, I thought I'd get elected, because I've been a candidate for a while, like you mentioned. I thought I'd get elected, see how the sausage is actually made, maybe become a little bit more moderate. And the opposite's happened. I've become more radical and even more disgusted with how governments run, how politics is run. I mean, the whole thing.
The truth. The
Yeah.
truth is just making it very clear, isn't it? And you mentioned about the federal government. Now, maybe there is a window of opportunity right now for things to change at the federal level, at least in terms of the current administration and its priorities. Uh, you ran for Congress. We have federal representation in this state. I use that loosely because I don't know who they're representing sometimes, because it doesn't seem like they're representing a lot of Oregon. And what kind of conversations do you have with, sometimes at the federal level, and also with some of your colleagues that this is just common sense when you talk about enforcement? What do they say to you?
Well, I think everyone wants more forest management, but if you talk about like the federal landscape, everyone wants more forest management. They want fewer forest fires, all that kind of stuff. But when you talk about what Oregon's issues are ONC land in particular, which is a very niche issue when you talk about national politics. When you're talking about forest fires, you're talking about BLM Forest Service land. That's Washington, Oregon, California, all those places that burn every summer. But when you talk about Oregon's issues, they're more specifically ONC land issues, which again is very niche. Most people don't understand the difference. There's maybe only, I'm sure Cliff Bentz, the Eastern Oregon, Southwestern Oregon congressman, my congressman, he's aware of the issue. And there's a gentleman named Bruce Westerman from Arkansas, actually. He's the only forester in Congress.
Yep.
Those are the only two that, if you probably took a poll of the 435 members, those are the only two that would even know what ONC land is. And so there's not an appetite or a lot of motivation for anyone to do anything about it. And even Cliff Bentz, I'm sure if he was God for a day, he would do something on it. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have very much ONC land actually in his district. It's mostly just north of the southwestern corner of his area into Douglas and like Lane County.
Yeah.
And so it's just, there's not an appetite to solve the issue. That was why I wanted to run for Congress. I'd still like to in the future one day, just because it is a federal issue. ONC land is federal. Unfortunately, I think it should go back to the counties to manage, which was who it was set up to originally benefit. But that being said, that'll be a future problem. And even if the Trump administration does something on it, it needs to get codified by Congress, because this is stuff that happens over 20, 30, 40-year growing cycles of Douglas fir. This isn't something that just one president can solve by executive order in the course of a 4-year administration.
No, you're right. It's structural and it's long term. And I sometimes like to look at when is the cup half full, maybe, and temporarily maybe it is. It's good that thank you for that explanation, because that actually really does help folks understand this is the Oregon perspective on it. This is what we're facing, and we're not being well represented, I think, by our statewide, our U.S. senators, because there's a bill, isn't there, that's in the Senate now called the Fix Our Forests Act. It's Bruce Westerman. When you mentioned his name, I'm like, I know who he is. He is the main guy driving that bill. And he's explaining to colleagues on both sides of the aisle what this is. There's even, I think, some Democrats that are definitely now supporting it, some grudgingly, but now more enthusiastic. But we hear from Jeff Merkley and Ron Wyden. They're not sure if they're going to be able to support it. And I'm just like, what state are you representing? Really,
Well, and when a guy from Arkansas knows more about forest issues than our own senators who are allegedly from this state, it tells you all you need to know right there. It's shameful. We should be doing so much better. We need better politicians representing Oregon on the federal level too. Wyden and Merkley are terrible. I don't know. One of the things that always gets me is if we had all the Republicans that fled to Idaho and Tennessee, if they were still here, we're getting enough Republican Californians moving into this state that if all those people had stayed and fight, we'd probably be a swing state by now. And that's really depressing to think about, because we're losing some of our best Republicans to other states because they're just throwing their hands up and giving up. And to be honest with you, I don't necessarily blame them, but I at least want to fight until the next redistricting cycle in 2030. Because that's, again, going to determine state control for the next decade. And so if we can get, like I said, a Republican Secretary of State, which we've done before fairly recently, if we could get a Republican Secretary of State in time for redistricting, that would be a huge win. We could get some fair maps. We could actually get Republican representation in this state. We'd get a more fair congressional map. We'd probably have at least one more, maybe two more Republicans representing us in Congress. We'd have a fair map on the state level so that Democrats would actually have to work with Republicans. I mean, even on the state level, we're really not that far gone. I mean, Democrats have maybe a 6 point majority on the state level, statewide level for governor and secretary of state and even U.S. senators.
Yeah.
The issue is we're just gerrymandered in such a bad place that we get a reputation because, you know, Democrats have a supermajority because they get to draw the maps. And so people think Oregon's some far left state when it's really fairly light blue. And not to mention, we have a very low population compared to like Washington State, which we're actually fairly identical to, but we're such low population that if we just had another 50,000 Republican voters move into the state, we'd be a swing state.
Well, that's really an interesting thing you just mentioned there. I happen to remember when in 2000, George W. Bush only lost the state to Al Gore by about 6,000 or 7,000 votes, and so there was a time that it was like that. Obviously, the state evolves and changes, but you mentioned 50,000 votes. That number sticks in my mind because that is approximately the number of votes out of several million that Measure 114 passed, which, you know, we didn't even, it was like they had to count and count and count, and finally it looked like they had the margin for it. But it's a radical anti-Second Amendment change to state laws, and then it's been stuck in court ever since because of the Harney County ruling that it's unconstitutional, and it's going through the appellate process. I believe it's sitting now with the Oregon State Supreme Court, but then there's some legislation too at the state level that relates to this. Could you kind of give the picture on that? And I love the background you have there, by the way. It speaks volumes of where you're coming from on this. So I think folks would really like to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, it's not a wallpaper. They're real. I can touch them. No, great transition there, seamless. I would like to say that we have 3076 was the gun bill affecting FFLs. Luckily, Republicans were able to help kill that. At the end of the day, kind of like the transportation package, I think they just didn't quite have enough Democrat votes, and so Republicans were kind of able to stall out until the very end and kill 3076, and that would have, in short, made it so much more difficult for people to operate gun stores in this state.
Yeah,
probably half of them, maybe more, would have gone out of business, especially the smaller ones like your, gunsmiths, your Cerakoders, your, small local gun stores, not like the larger ones, but all of those probably would have gone out of business if 3076 passed. So if they don't think they can ban guns due to the Supreme Court, they'll just go after the people that sell guns, which in effect will do the same thing. So we were able to kill that one, which was fantastic. But unfortunately, we didn't have the ability to kill 243, which was what kind of codified Measure 114 into law, and that would ban, magazines over 10 rounds. And I tried to, articulate to everyone on the committees that was going through. I'm like, this would make 95% of Oregon gun owners criminals overnight. Like almost everybody has a magazine that holds over 10 rounds. I mean, every single gun that you can see behind me, AR-15. Well, actually, technically, we got a revolver right here that only holds 6 rounds. So pretty much if you have a revolver, you'd be exempt, but everybody else that owns any kind of standard firearm would be a criminal. Even all the Democrats who say they're gun owners, they would all be criminals as well once this goes into effect in March of 26. And, I tried to articulate that. They frankly didn't care. They were moving forward with the bill regardless. It would also ban things like forced reset triggers, bump stocks, even though, again, there was a Supreme Court case on bump stocks, so I don't know how we're going to turn around and ban it. So the one saving grace on 243, and the reason, even though it would make, again, 95% of gun owners criminals, the only saving grace is that it's probably the gun bill that's most likely to get thrown out in the courts because it's so egregious, because it affects so many regular gun owners. I don't know about the bump stock thing and rapid fire activators and like force reset triggers and things like that, but I'm pretty sure the magazine capacity thing is going to get thrown out. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way, so I'm prepared for that. But I mean, the fact that Democrats would vote for that is pretty shocking. Again, making that many people criminals is insane. And not to mention, I think if Measure 114 came up on the ballot this time, it would be a dramatically different result. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of people, even Democrats and even far left wing people that are now pro gun is dramatically higher than it was back when 114 passed in, what was that, 2020? I want to say maybe 2018. I can't even remember.
I think it was either 2020 or 2022. I can't remember which one, but it was
Yeah,
you're right, because I mean a lot of people are beginning to realize that when they don't have the police protection and they got the surging crime, and in
exactly.
rural areas especially where the response time isn't minutes, it's hours or never. um
Well, that's the best part is with the whole defund the police movement. The slow response times went from just being in rural areas to now even the suburbs. So before you'd have a policeman at your house in 10 minutes, then even in the suburbs, it's 20 minutes after the whole defund the police movement. So it made a lot of regular people, even people that'll still vote Democrat, it made a lot of them gun owners overnight. And so, I mean, you just have to look at the amount of record breaking gun sales we had almost every month back in 2020 to 2023. That whole period, there's so many more gun owners now in this state and across the country than ever before. So I think if that exact same measure were to come across the ballot in 2026, for example, I think it would probably go down by 5 or 10 points instead
yeah.
of passing by half or 1% or whatever it was at the time. So I think the appetite in Oregon has completely changed around guns, and which I think is fantastic. But yet again, the legislator doesn't really care about the opinions of Oregonians. They're still going to pass whatever the hell they want
They're way far to the left of the population on this, and I
on
think it was,
everything.
yeah,
But
on
yeah,
everything. Representative Osborne told me last week that Representative Chai Chi, who actually has like I think is it Mao, or it has like a picture of Mao in her office. She's kind of famously super far left wing, but she's a gun owner. And he's like, I try to talk to her about it, and there seems to be this double standard that's always aimed at law abiding gun owners, but they say that they're making us safer with these things. But excuse me, aren't most of the crimes, gun crimes as they describe them, aren't they being committed in urban areas by people with weapons that they are possess illegally? Like, the people dealing drugs in Portland, they've
well, and
got.
exactly, and even the things that we just made illegal in 243, like Glocks, which is an auto sears, they're already illegal federally. So why do we need to ban them in the state of Oregon? I mean, it's stupid. And even, I like Chai Chi on some things because I'm so far right and she's so far left that we actually end up agreeing on some of the more libertarian things like
Hmm,
gun ownership. I think everyone should be able to own a gun. Um, and, I think that, government's gone too far. We saw what happened during the George Floyd riots and during COVID. And, I think everyone should be able to protect themselves. And she thinks people should be able to own guns kind of for the opposite reason because Trump's a totalitarian dictator
yeah.
and so on and so forth. But even she voted for that 243 gun bill. So I don't think she's as pro gun as she pretends to be. Most Democrats, frankly, aren't. But I asked her, I'm like, I thought you said you owned a gun. Like, you just voted to make yourself a criminal. And she's like, well, I guess I'll get a 10-round magazine. I'm like, I'd like to check in on that in March of 2026
Let's see where
and
you're at.
see where your 15 or 16-round magazine for your concealed carry handgun is, because I have a feeling you're still going to have it. Like, if this goes into effect, I'm not going to go through my garage and my shop and all the guns in this gun room and pull out every magazine over 10 rounds and destroy it. No one's going to do that.
No.
Everyone's going to keep them. And in fact, they're panic buying right now still, ever since 114 went into effect. So, I mean, there's dramatically more of these magazines in circulation than ever before. And not to mention, this isn't a complex part of a firearm. Most of these magazines for like an AR-15 cost $8. People have dozens of them if they have an AR-15, which each one is going to be a separate, I think, a Class A misdemeanor. I mean, so if you're, and they're not grandfathered in either, which is kind of a thing a lot of Democrats thought when they voted for the bill. They thought these were going to be grandfathered in, and they're not.
Didn't read it. No.
And of course, and so they're not grandfathered in. And there was, in one of the earlier drafts of the bill, it was going to be, oh, you just can't have them out, you can't transport them, you can't have them in your vehicle, you can't have them at a shooting range, but you can keep them in your home. And now that's not even the case. You can't have them in your home, you can't have them anywhere, period. If this law goes into effect, you're somehow going to have to destroy them all in March of 2026, which is insane. And again, it's pretty much, if you know someone owns a gun, you can raid their house and at least get them on a misdemeanor crime for having a magazine. I mean, it's insane how far we've lowered the threshold for being a criminal in Oregon. I mean, we won't deport illegal aliens here that rape or murder an Oregonian. We won't even deport them and cooperate with ICE. But yet, if you're a law-abiding citizen who has a magazine of over 10 rounds, we'll throw the book at you. It's ridiculous.
Well, and then the concealed carry handgun limitations, they keep going after that.
Yep.
And what's sad about that is the least likely to commit any gun crime is this group. It's the most background checked, vetted group that you can have.
I don't think that's just gun crime. I think that's any crime. I think their concealed carry permit holders are the most law-abiding demographic that we know of, period.
Yep.
So it's, and sorry to cut you off, but it just made me think of when we were debating that issue. The reason they wanted those limitations was because they're like, oh, I want my city council to be able to debate in safety, knowing that someone who's upset isn't going to bring a gun in and shoot them, basically, if they, have a ruling that they disagree with. And again, we're having this discussion in the Capitol that's a gun-free zone.
Yeah.
We've got probably 3 or 4 OSP troopers or, undercover officers with firearms in the building with us. It's rich for politicians that have round the clock OSP armed
Protection.
security to talk about gun violence and how, we need to protect ourselves. Not everyone in the state of Oregon has an Oregon State Police security detail that's armed and trained. Most people can't afford that. And so as a result, people have to conceal carry. And again, most law-abiding demographic that we know of, most of these are good people or retired law enforcement. I mean, most guys that I know that go to like USPSA competitive shooting matches, they also conceal carry, and most of them can outshoot almost every cop that I know. I mean, this isn't, it's just something that it just makes us so much safer. You look at all these shootings that are stopped by people with concealed carry permits or even armed security. There was that church shooting a couple, like 5-6 weeks ago. I mean, there's all sorts of examples like this. And it's just really, again, depressing to think that the Democrats that we have representing us are so disconnected from reality with a private security detail while they restrict all of us from having guns.
Yeah. And what person that wants to go shoot up a city council is going to be stopped by passing a law that says that they shouldn't have a gun in the city council chambers? No one's going to be stopped by that who's that bad, right? So it's actually only, again, aimed at law-abiding citizens who actually are much more likely to stop that guy than anybody.
I mean, I always bring it up, but I survived a terrorist attack in the middle of a gun-free continent. I concealed carry almost every day, and I didn't have a gun because I was in the middle of Europe, and this guy still got a fully automatic AK-47, 8 full magazines, and a handgun. So I'm just not convinced that gun-free zones work. And then on top of that, if you really follow this logic all the way through, even if Democrats got everything that they wanted, we banned all guns in the United States, say we're just like Europe. Let's look at what the terrorists do in Europe now. They don't even do gun crimes anymore because it's not, frankly, the most effective. Most effective thing to do is to build a bomb, because you can't shoot back at a bomb. It's already gone off. By the time you know anything's wrong, it's detonated and killed 20, 30 people. Or they'll rent a freaking car for $20 a day and then just drive it into a crowd of people. Zero training, zero smuggling of illegal devices. You're not manufacturing a bomb or a full auto machine gun. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. And so by by fighting the gun crime issue, we're basically just moving terrorist tactics down a road that's less and less preventable for the average person. And that's, again, you just have to look at Europe and how that hasn't worked out for them to see what's coming down the pike for us if we continue down this road. And I don't think we should.
Yeah, and really, if you focus on identifying and removing the terrorists, which unfortunately in the last 4 years we have an unknown, untold number that were able to just come across the border. They even identified some of them, right? And then
Yep.
others, they are gotaways. They have no idea actually who those people are and where they are because they never were detected and well, I won't say vetted because they really didn't vet people, um, but they did have some people that they fingerprinted, identified, and still let them in. And then there's others that just like if you're a bad guy, you don't want to get caught. If you're a terrorist, you're not going to go and say, "Hey, I'm a terrorist, let me in." You're going to go and try to evade the border patrol, which is the easiest thing you could imagine until President Trump came into office and, frankly, has reduced the border crossings by almost 99%. It's an unbelievable change. But then we've got all these people floating around here. And where would I go if I'm those bad guys? Well, I'm not going to go someplace where someone can shoot back. So we've got this nice little list of identified places that
Yeah.
anybody can go, and Oregon's trying to make it worse.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of shootings that happen in places that aren't gun-free zones, uh, but you just don't hear about them because the death toll isn't that high.
Yeah,
Um, my friends and I do a shooting drill called a Dicken drill, which is Eli Dicken or Dickens, I don't remember, but he stopped a mall shooting from like 40 meters away. He shot a guy with a concealed carry permit. I think the guy killed maybe one or two people. But I bring the point up is that we have examples of shootings in movie theaters and malls and things like that. But the ones that really make national news are things like school shootings because the death toll is so much higher because no one else can bring in a gun to defend themselves.
yeah.
And we have so many examples of this. It's again shocking that we're still following the same line of logic that just results in higher death tolls.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we need some common sense in the state and balance to our politics, and I know that's what you're pointing out and advocating for. Uh, and I do hope that there are people that are going to be in a different place on many of these issues going forward, because that could shift the larger political calculus. We've got this endemic problem with homelessness and addiction, and I know that's one of the things that's affected every district in the state. Where do you think that one's at right now, and the challenge that you see in trying to deal with that going forward? Is it? I mean, Grants Pass was a major decision by the Supreme Court, and that's just outside of your district there, but it affected everything. And yet, Oregon still likes the way things were before that Supreme Court decision. So, how's that affecting things, and what do you think of the prospect of fixing it?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see that issue improving for us while Democrats are still in leadership. Much like the ODOT budget, they just think that we need to throw more money at the problem. Um, and one of my favorite, I can't remember what it was. It was like, I think this was the OHCS budget. They were talking about how this is still a very large problem because for every person we house, three more become homeless. And I'm like, so you're saying that what you're doing isn't working? Like either it's not working or we need to quadruple your already massive budget that we frankly can't afford. And so if what you're doing isn't working, and in fact things are still getting demonstrably worse, then why should we even continue funding you guys at your current level? I mean, we need to try something different. We're not throwing money at this isn't going to solve it, obviously. I mean, anyway, it's so frustrating. But yeah, I don't see anything changing in Oregon until we get more Republican leadership, if we're honest. And I hate saying that like Republicans have all the answers because I think we see even federally when we have a Republican Congress, we don't get nearly as much done as we should or promise on the campaign trail. But at least in Oregon, I mean, man, it would be a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's you can end up spending an infinite amount of money on something that is not the solution to the problem, and still sit around and claim that you need more money because the problem's not solved or even growing. And I think that's the situation we're in. But it's absurd, isn't it? I mean, giving somebody a home who is addicted to fentanyl is not going to get them unaddicted to fentanyl anytime soon. And we're a state that's what, 50th, 49th or 50th in terms of treatment. So there's really no chance that's going to change.
Even if you look at it from an economic argument, you now have government in the business of housing, and not just in the business of making housing, which they really don't do that well. They're in the business of buying housing and creating housing for homeless people. So you're talking again, these are like they have something ridiculous. It's like around $400,000 a unit for an apartment. If the government, state of Oregon, builds an apartment complex for homeless people, it comes out to about $400,000 a unit. So you have the government in competition with private industry and, frankly, private home buyers who want to buy a home or buy an apartment or rent an apartment. And all the contractors that build those things are saying, no, I'd rather go build one for the state of Oregon for a homeless person at $400,000 a pop, instead of competing in the private world and doing it for 150 to 250,000 a unit. And then again, you have the government buying apartment complexes and buying houses, single family dwellings and duplexes to put homeless people in, or families that are struggling. And again, now the average home buyer has to compete with the state of Oregon for a house. And it's just driving costs up. Because if you're selling a home and the state of Oregon will offer you $450,000 for it, you'll probably take that bet because you know the deal's not going to fall through. And again, just like everything else with competition, wage competition, we have illegal immigrants coming into this country driving wages down for everyone else. We have the government competing for houses, driving home prices up. I mean, it blows my freaking mind. They don't just understand supply and demand economics.
Basic
And
economics.
yeah, the cost of housing would go down if government stayed out of it and stopped competing against your average home buyer. I mean, it's so incredibly frustrating. Plus, obviously, get out of the way when it comes to developing and urban growth boundaries and things like that on like a local level. Allow people to develop and build more houses, and that'd probably solve the problem right there as well. But instead, we just tend to set up more roadblocks. Even things like education, we're 48th in the country with education. Whenever we debate education on the House floor, it's about becoming more inclusive for whatever kind of special interest group that representative feels inclined to talk about. But yet we're not talking about the bigger picture, that we're 48th in the freaking country for education. Why don't we do something about that instead of worrying about gender studies or DEI programs in high school? Or I mean, it makes you want to blow your brains out.
Yeah, well, and it is also the fact that they aren't learning to read, write, and do math at grade level, which I guess to teach the gender studies are going to just have to use like symbols and cartoons, because people, they just can't read well enough to take in anything sophisticated. But I really do feel like the kids should be able to file some sort of class action lawsuit later when everybody realizes that it was Oregon's kids that were let down by the people who claimed to have their best interests at heart and spent a ton of money actually failing to educate them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And this is a nationwide problem. It's not just Oregon. Honestly, if other states reported their data more accurately, Oregon probably wouldn't be as low as they are in the rankings. There's probably a few states that are worse than us. But regardless, I mean, we have so many advantages in the state of Oregon. We should be in the top 10 for education every year, no matter what. We shouldn't be arguing over if we're 44th or 48th or 45th. I mean, we have so many advantages that other states don't have in Oregon when it comes to education. And we throw so much money at the problem in this country and in this state. It's obviously not a money issue. That money just ends up going to teachers' unions. So why don't we worry about outcomes? Why don't we worry about freeing up competition with a voucher program for homeschool or charter schools? I mean, again, competition works in the free market. It should work in education. Yeah, I know this was a huge issue in the Trump campaign, but ever since the Department of Education was founded, outcomes have dropped dramatically. I mean, you look at a high school textbook from the 1950s. I mean, it's challenging for adults today. I mean, we have gotten dumber as a society, not more intelligent, even though we have, you know, the answers to the world on our phone. We can
Yeah.
Google, um, and yet we somehow don't think critically. We can't speak as well as people spoke even in the 60s and 70s. Um, just our education system in general has gone so far downhill, along with timber, along with our gun rights, along with everything else in society. We need a hard reset, and I just hope people start waking up and start fighting against this 30-year Democrat establishment we have in Oregon. We should be doing so much better, and it doesn't even take a lot of effort. It just takes government getting out of the way and allowing the free market to succeed. I mean, we don't even really have a free market in this country anymore. There's too much government interference, and what people blame capitalism for is really just artificial government created monopolies.
Yeah. Or crony capitalists that are moving in.
Potato, potato. Yeah, exactly.
And there was a headline today. I'll just mention this and because that was a great summary of everything we talked about here today. But headline: Oregon medical brace companies at center of $23 million Medicare fraud case. $23 million. Two guys, apparently from Canada, that own a company here in Oregon, bilked $23 million from Medicare, and they're being investigated. And it's just like, am I surprised? Are you surprised that these guys are basing themselves in Oregon, just like the guy that got busted by the feds, who was running this interstate drug smuggling operation out of Salem? Just
Yeah,
walking.
most of his operation was based in like Arizona and California, other states, but yet he, the head of the organization, was right there in Salem, about a mile from the capital, because we're a sanctuary state, sanctuary city, all that good stuff. Um, I mean, it's incredible. I really don't get it. And there's some Democrats that are actually decent people, um, but they sure don't vote that way. I mean, when the chips are down, they vote party line because they have to. Because again, there's repercussions if they don't. And even talking to them after like a tough vote, they'll be like, "Oh man, I really didn't want to vote for that." And me as a Republican, I'm thinking, "Why did you?
Yeah.
Your constituents put you here, not the unions. Well, indirectly, I guess. Not Kotek or Fahey. You're responsible to your constituents. That's what a republic was supposed to be. That was supposed to be, we send the best representation of our district in one person to go through and think through all the hard decisions. So frankly, we don't have to.
Be a
And
representative. Yeah, be a
yeah,
representative.
that's
Represent.
exactly what the system is set up to be. And when you don't do that, when you sell out your vote, so to speak, to a union or to your party leadership, I mean, that's why we just get these devolving problems, because there's even Democrats that want to stop it, but they feel powerless to, because if they do, they'll lose their committee or they'll lose re-election or whatever. And at some point, I'm like, you have to put your state over your own personal political career. I mean, if I could have stopped any one of these terrible gun bills, especially, or tax bills, by sacrificing my own political career, by walking out or doing whatever you name it, I would have, because this problem is bigger than any one person, and we need representatives that are willing to put it all on the line to stop some of this stuff. And we have a little bit of that issue on the Republican Party as well. Don't get me wrong, but seeing how these Democrats will openly oppose something in committee, talk against it on the floor, and still vote yes, I'm just like, what are you doing?
Well, this is the Democrat Party complains about authoritarianism, but really, actually, they're afraid of the authoritarians that run their party, and that's what you pointed out. But maybe the good news is this last session, there's some people for whom it was just too much, and they couldn't vote for a bill that their leadership tried to order them to pass, and it's a glimmer of light. Maybe that is a great way to kind of wrap things up today. Is everything that you're saying does make sense to a person, and it doesn't matter whether the word Republican or Democrat is on it. It makes common sense if people really want to make the state better and represent the people that they've been elected to represent. Thank you. You obviously, you know, from a train in Paris where you had to put it all on the line with your friends and do the thing that was necessary in that moment, to fighting for the people in your district in the state of Oregon. I want to thank you for doing that and for being there and speaking out, because that actually is still very important. I think anybody in any part of the state, not just your district, who sees what we talked about here today is going to feel strongly that there's hope and there is common sense. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for fighting the good fight.
Well, thanks so much for having me again. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I know this has been a long time in the making, so it's good to finally do it. And
Yeah,
to all your viewers, I would just say let's go all out the next election cycle or two. I mean, we really only have until redistricting in 2030. The wind is kind of at our backs in a lot of ways. I think the Trump administration is giving us some good wins that we can take back on the state level in Oregon and say, hey, this is working on the federal level. Let's do it in the state of Oregon. Um, and frankly, the Democrats just don't stand for anything right now other than being an anti Trump party that doesn't really have the same momentum as it once did. And frankly, their policies are just outright unpopular when it comes to things like guns, transgender issues, education, ODOT budget, you name it. They're unpopular and they don't have anyone really to champion their ideals. And their ideals are, 20% popular to the Republicans' position of 80%. We
yep.
need to double down on, Trump's last election, what the Republican Party stands for, because frankly, we're on the winning side and we're on the right side of history. We just need to get the votes to actually accomplish that in the state of Oregon. So please stay engaged. Don't go to Idaho or Tennessee or Texas yet. Um, Give us a couple more years, and I think we can turn Oregon around. It's not too far gone. It is very achievable. We just need to lock in and actually do it. So thanks again for having me anytime.
Amen, brother. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for everyone who's watching. By the way, if you want to follow what Representative Skarlatos is doing, you can go to oregonlegislature.gov/Skarlatos. And also, he has his own campaign website, which is Alek, ALEK, for Oregon.com. And you can sign up for his newsletter and stay on top of what Representative Skarlatos is doing and saying. Thank you again for joining us. And please, everyone, share the show with everyone you can. And we'll see you on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Have a good night.